Welcome to the Bree Pod. I'm here with Noele Brabon, licensed clinical social worker for the rural area. Hi, Noele.
Hi, Bree. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, thank you for joining me today. So as you know, I brought you on because September is National Yoga Month, and you are the queen of yoga in my world.
You're too sweet.
So I thought it'd be perfect to bring you on here today and just pick your brain regarding yoga and you.
Wonderful.
So the first thing that I wanted to ask is, how did you first get introduced to yoga, and what inspired you to become a yoga instructor?
Yes. Great question. It might be a little long-winded because we're going to go all the way back to 2010. In 2010, I attended the University of Albany to pursue my master's in social work. And with, graduate school or anything in life, it can be, pretty stressful. So I had heard about yoga at that time. And I was like, you know what? This is supposed to help with stress. So I bought a mat, I bought a DVD. I was so excited. I had it in my first little apartment in Albany. I'm ready to go. I did the DVD and it didn't change my life. So I'm like, I don't think this is for me. So I put my yoga mat in the corner. And after I graduated with my master's in social work, I ended up actually just throwing it out. And then I know, like I said, this is a long-winded story. So then I moved back to the North Country because it was one of my goals to bring good mental health services to a rural area. I currently, work in a rural outpatient setting as a licensed clinical social worker. But before I came to St. Lawrence County, I worked in Clinton County in Plattsburgh, New York. And again, I loved being a therapist. But even with personal and work stress, I was like, you know what? I should give yoga another try. So in 2013, I went back. I went to Target, or Target as they call it. And I was so excited because it's kind of fun picking out your own mat. Us girls, we want to have the coolest color design. And I actually ran into an NHL player because it was during the lockout for the NHL. One of the Montreal Canadian players was there. So I felt like this is my sign. Here I am in Target getting my yoga mat. There's an NHL player. I was puffed. So I was like, you know what? The DVD before didn't work out. I'm going to go to a class. Like, no experience, nothing. I'm going for it. So I signed up for my first class and I was so excited. Everybody was so nice. And I was practicing, and halfway through the yoga class, the yoga teacher kind of called me out that I wasn't doing things correctly or perfect in her mind. And so after the class, I figured out that that this group of individuals had been practicing yoga together for 10 years. And so I didn't really fit into that mold, that they just knew everything. And I was just, I guess, supposed to know as well. There was no accommodations or compassion in my mind. So I was like, you know what? This is my sign. Maybe I'll try it. Maybe she had a bad day. I'm going to try one more time. And it happened again. So I was like, you know what? I tried a second time. You know what? That NHL player, it was a Montreal Canadiens player. I'm a New York Islanders fan. So maybe that was my sign. So I'm like, we're done with yoga. We're good. And throughout this time, though, in graduate school, I did start meditation. So I was like, you know what? Maybe yoga is not for me, but I do love meditation. So, and then I moved closer to family to Franklin County, but was commuting to St. Lawrence County. So for your viewers on the West Coast, it's like a good 45-minute, we live 12 miles from the Canadian border. So with snow, an hour. And at that time, I was at a clinic where I was commuting like 90 minutes. So it was a lot. It was a lot. And I was going through some personal things in my life too, where I wasn't maybe my highest self, doing my best. We all do our best. So one day I'm driving through Canton, New York, and I'm not texting, but I'm like, how in the car sometimes you mess around with the radio and things like this. So this is 2015, before cars really had like the smart, like Apple Play or Smart or things like that. So I'm kind of messing around a little bit, and I'm not paying attention because I'm not focused in the car, but I'm not focused in my life either, right? So usually when you're at a stop sign or a red light and then it turns green, the person automatically goes. Well, this guy hesitated just a little bit and I wasn't paying attention. So what did I do? I hit him. And so great. I hit this guy on the way to work. He didn't know, like 30 on my 30, minute drive to get there. I cried the whole time because I was going through a hard time in my life. So we pull over and I'm like just stressed. I'm like, this guy's going to lose his mind on me. I made an assumption. I get out of the car. The man walks over to me and I go, I'm so sorry. I hit your car. He goes, there's no damage. You didn't really even hit it. You just tapped it. He goes, I'm not worried about your car. I'm not worried about my car. I'm worried about you. He walks over to me and I'm like in shock by his compassion. And he puts his hand on my shoulder and he goes, are you okay? And I'm like, wow. And this, are you okay? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm fine. Inside, I'm like, not really, but yeah, I'm fine. And then he looked me like dead in the eye and said to me, you need to take care of yourself. And I was so taken back from that because that was, the last parting words that my grandmother shared with me before she passed away.
Wow.
So I was just like, I get back in my car and I was like shell shocked. And I was like, you know what? And I kind of had like a puff up talk to myself, like a motivational talk that they do in like locker rooms of sports, but to myself in the car. I was like, you know what? You've been through some stuff, baby girl. You need to pull it together and you're going to change your life and you're going to do it today. And it's going to be hard, but this accident wasn't an accident, so to speak. So I got back in my car and I went, to work. I wasn't late if anybody's interested. So there across the hall from where I worked at this outpatient clinic was another therapist. And ironically, she was also a yoga teacher. So I went to her and I said, I gave her the whole backstory. I go, I'm kind of nervous, but third time's the charm. And I'll be forever thankful for Heather. Her compassion, her patience with me gave me the confidence to, really open my heart to yoga and also open my heart to going to classes again. And so I did a lot of classes in the area where I live, in different parts in St. Lawrence County. And then I, expanded, to different areas. Last August, I did like yoga with the elephants at the Syracuse Zoo, which was amazing. I did, for my birthday this year, I did yoga in a lavender field in the Adirondacks. So I really opened, my heart to it. And then the pandemic hit, right? And I took it as a time to go within. So I really upped my meditation, my yoga practice, and then there was an opportunity to have an in-person training for yoga, because at that time there was a lot of online yoga teacher training, which is great, but I needed that. For me, I needed that in-person, one-on-one, and in that group setting. So I was a little nervous for it. I'm like, I don't know. I took it as a like, I'm going to just have a deeper relationship with yoga, learn the philosophy, learn the poses, and build a deeper relationship with myself. I have no expectations. I may never even teach, but I'm going to go for it. And I'm so thankful to my family and my friends. They're like, Noelle, you're a therapist. And becoming a yoga teacher, you can bring that into your sessions. You can,
Yeah.
Start at your clinic, and in our community. And so I think sometimes in life, you just got to go for it. And I went for it. And it was a wonderful experience. And so our first night, I get there and I'm like, my gosh, this place looks really familiar. So it was at the Flying Lotus Yoga Center in Canton, New York. So ironically, 6 years later, I walked into the yoga studio where just like 100 feet, I had that encounter with that man in that accident.
Oh, wow.
It was like look at like all the stars aligned, I was like sat there and I'm like, whoa, okay, this is my sign. I was nervous and now I felt, that calm. And I was so lucky to be able to be surrounded with really positive and supportive women as our teacher and as my fellow students, or my fellow, learners as well, students of yoga. In our first night, our lead yoga teacher said, I want to challenge you guys for something. I'm like, okay. After, hands you the binder of like 300 pages, you're like, okay, we're going to add one more challenge. So he goes, I want you throughout, our program in May, we are going to have a community program that you will come up with. And I knew instantly what I wanted to do. My goal, as it was to bring therapy to a rural community, was to bring yoga to our rural community. And not in a sense of a business like that. Yoga's wonderful, but if I was going to start a business, I don't think it would be yoga. So it wasn't as a business, but as a way to give back to my community, as I have been given luckily in my life, from my community and my friends and, with my family. And so I graduated in May of 2022. Then in October of 2022, I started a free program at our local library where my mom works. And I call her my yoga mom. She was very instrumental in helping us. And I'm really excited to announce that in this coming October, 2023, we will start a yoga program at our church. And it's completely free if people are willing to give donations for our food pantry. We serve almost 300 meals a week for our community. And this is a way that we can raise food for our community. And I think that's great to raise money for a community, but I want to share why it's really close to my heart. So you said my last name's Braden, and there's a story behind my name. So we're going to go way back.
Okay.
So in the 1920s, during the Great Depression, my grandfather, Eldridge Brabon, was he didn't grow up in like a, I don't want to say regular household, but he didn't grow up in a household. He grew up in an orphanage. And he grew up in an orphanage to about the age of 8 or 10. So one day he's living there. Can you imagine living in an orphanage to begin with? But during the Great Depression in the United States, which was pretty rough, right?
Yeah.
And so one day, a pastor and his wife came to visit the orphanage and visit the children. And so my grandfather walked right up to him and said, I don't want to be here anymore. I want a family. Will you adopt me?
Oh,
And the pastor did.
okay.
He did. And he was given the last name Brabon, and he was brought back to the North Country. And growing up in that house, even though he had food in those first couple months, he had 3 square meals, he would still hoard food. He like steal from their cupboards and hoard food under his bed because of the fear and the past trauma of not having enough food.
Yeah.
So, um, and what's so interesting in all of this, um, is the orphanage that he grew up in his childhood is in Canton, New York, where I was in the accident, where I did my yoga teacher training.
Wow.
So it's like, they say that, the divine comes into your life if you just follow the path. You don't even need a plan. It will come. And I was always kind of like, that's a little granola for me, even a little bit. But I'm like, you know what? I'm open to receive. So that's, a little bit of background of, my story. And why I wanted to become a yoga teacher was because I didn't want anybody to feel like I did in that
Yeah.
yoga class in Plattsburgh, New York.
Yeah.
I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel safe. I felt singled out. And any of the insecurities I had about myself or my body were exposed in a public manner.
Yeah.
Like there's 20 other people staring at me. So I was like, no, we're not doing this. We're going to create a community of yoga where people can accept themselves and their body and feel safe so they can, open their heart to themselves and to our community.
I think that's really beautiful and very inspiring because I love that you said that like the way that you are giving back with um yoga, you're not only giving it to the community so that they have something for their lives and whatever's, happening for them, but also like if they do donate, it's going to go to a pantry. So you're doing two things in one shot for the community. And just talking about your grandfather with how he was like you know, kind of hoarding food. It's kind of funny that not funny, but beautiful that you guys are also doing the food pantry. So like it all is circling back. So it's just amazing um how you got into it. And I like that you also are sharing the times that you did give up on it. And I'm not saying give up, but you know what I mean? You were like, nah, not for me.
Broke up with it. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's so many times, like, I mean, I will admit this to myself. There's so many times I've gone to yoga and then I'm like, nah, it's not for me. No, I can't do this. Um, but it's true. Like, if I would have gone to a class like you did where they called me out, I'd be like, never again, period. Not going back. So,
Yeah.
anyway, it's just really cool that even with all of that, even with the accident, there's so many different ways you could have took that, but you brought it back to today, to 2023, and offering a class in October. I think that's beautiful.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Um, so I know that you are a therapist that we talked about, and I know that mindfulness and meditation and everything go together, so I was wondering how important is mindfulness and meditation in yoga practice? And how do these aspects contribute to the overall well-being?
That's a great question. I actually teach yoga at the outpatient clinic I work at, and it's like Wellness Wednesday. So today I actually taught today, and it's so interesting because even though I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a forever yoga student. You know,
Yeah,
I don't like separation of that, right? So we separate, like, I did in the beginning, like, here's meditation and here's yoga. They're actually the same thing, right? Because we do the poses to open up our body, open up and create space. As we create space in our body, we create space in our mind for ourselves and for others. And as we create that space in our body, we let go of that tension, all those, repressed emotions that we have in our body. We're able to sit for meditation longer. So that's why we do all those poses, so we can sit in meditation longer. And yoga is actually a moving meditation. So a lot of the times people confuse like yoga, I got to be, into this pretzel shape. But that's not yoga. It's to create space in our body, mind, and heart. Doing a little pretzel pose is great, for, Instagram or, social media. Um, but it's really to help sit with in longer in meditation. And a lot of the times people are like, well, I can't meditate because my mind will run. If your mind runs during meditation, welcome to the human race, because everyone's mind will run. But it's having that compassion and that kindness to self to bring it, back to the present moment. So I wanted to share a little bit of some of the benefits of meditation. I found this from the Mayo Clinic, so I'll give them a shout out. So some of research has shown that some of the emotional and physical benefits of meditation include, gaining a new perspective on stressful situations, building skills to manage your stress, self-awareness, being present, reducing those negative emotions that we may experience during the day, also increasing our patience, our creativity. And it also lowers, though, on a physical level, that blood pressure, also the heart rate, and it improves our overall sleep. And also, it's shown to help symptoms like anxiety, asthma, cancer, chronic pain, depression, heart disease, sleep problems, again, tension, headaches. So there's so much research now in 2023 of the benefits of meditation. And that's all what research says. But I would like to share with your viewers, some of my personal benefits that I have found with my meditation practice. So every morning, I don't sit first in meditation. Of course, I have to make my coffee. So I make my coffee and try, not to get overloaded by turning on my phone and seeing like text or missed calls or like social media. I'm like, that can wait. Give me 15 minutes, So
yeah.
I'm manifested, and I was able to have where I live a yoga room. And so I go in, I put my mat out, I sit on a blanket, and for 15 minutes every day, like that's my routine. And then after, I read a scripture that helps me as well to start my day. And what's why I love my 15 minutes is because of meditation, is because it kind of anchors me in that present moment to start my day. But on a bigger scale, it anchors us in our worth. Like, I don't need anything around me external. Like, here I am, Noele Brabon in North Bangor, New York. I am worthy. I am lovable. I'm important. It just that self care, that time really anchors me within myself.
Yeah.
And as we practice it, we let go, all so many things come up in that meditation and that time we acknowledge, but we don't get stuck on it. We let it go. And it takes a lot of practice. I mean, I've been practicing since 2010. It's 13 years. And also it's like when I sit with myself, and that's hard to do. Like, we always want to be doing, right? We almost think in our culture it's like selfish to take that time for ourselves. But it's taught me, like, I can sit with the good, the bad, the ugly of myself, but also the divine.
Yeah.
So it's helped me build that compassion for myself. um and also it helps that non-doing, that relationship, because a lot in our culture we're in that masculine energy, that doing, we have to produce, we have to provide. But balancing in that feminine energy of, I'm open to receive, not just some good, but all good. And that's what I've learned a lot. And meditation has helped me build trust within myself, and also helped increase like my intuition, and really help calm the chatter in your mind, that negative self-talk, that you know self-defeating things that come throughout the day. And it also helps me let go of my ego in like real time, off the mat. Like, sometimes I'm finding that pause in life, and this has taken a long time, but it's not an instant fix. And when I first started meditation, I did guided imagery. If you're going through a hard time, you might be like not even focused enough to sit in meditation. So I would just lie in my bed after a hard day at graduate school and just listen to it. Or I'd get up sometimes in the morning and just listen to it laying in bed. And that teaches us the non-doing. We don't have to do anything in our life to be worthy. We're inherently worthy. And that's what meditation really teaches you. So off the mat, I've noticed in my personal relationships, my romantic relationships, my family, my friends, we're complete strangers. It's given me a pause. So the best example I can share with you guys is like, you ever see on the news where somebody's talking in like New York, and then they're interviewing somebody, in like Spain. And there's that like 7-second delay. So I'll kind of impersonate somebody. They'll be like, yes, that delay.
Yeah.
That's what meditation does for you. So when somebody's like really negative towards you, or you just want to react, my meditation practice has given me that little split second to be like, Noelle, calm down, pause, and kind of respond and not react. So
Wow.
that meditation helps us build the relationship with ourselves, but also with others as well.
I think that's amazing that you shared that. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, when it came to meditation, I always am feeling like, oh, I can't do it. I was that person that's like, my thoughts, they just run, 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 you know?
Yeah.
And the other thing with me is I can't sit still for too long, or I feel like I can't, almost like I might be a little bit fearful of the present, of actually living in the present. So listening to what you're saying with meditation, how like it's not going to be something that you just instantly like, okay, I'm going to be quiet for this moment and be in this moment. It's bringing yourself back. It actually kind of makes me want to consider maybe re-looking at meditation because I think that your analogy was perfect where, you know, you could have that moment of delay and just be like, how am I gonna go about this? And I think that could be very helpful for me in motherhood. So I like that you
Mhm.
shared that, because I'm actually gonna think about meditation. I
No,
was always like, no, no, it's not for me.
and a lot of the places where I've gotten my guided imagery is I'll give her a shout out, and I don't want to butcher her name, but Bella Ruth Napperstack. She has a lot of her, she's a licensed clinical social worker as well. And she's done, I only kind of listen to her to be honest, and you can get them off of healthyjourneys.com. And it's pretty inexpensive. Um, and that's been really helpful. And it's research based.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that resource. We'll definitely add that in. I'll add that in the comments so that they have that. Um, so the next question I have for you is how can yoga help individuals manage stress, find inner peace, especially in today's fast-paced world?
Yes. So I like to give examples because that's the best way that I can remember things. So I'm going to self-disclose. I hope I don't offend any of your listeners here, but I'm a New York Jets fan. It's football season,
Yep.
and this past Monday was the most watched game in Monday night football. And so, if you're not familiar with football, the New York Jets have not won a Super Bowl since 1969. It's been a
Wow.
long time.
Yeah, okay.
It's been a really long time. And so we have our quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, and he's won Super Bowls. He's been MVP, I think, like 4 times. He came and is our quarterback for the New York Jets. So we are puffed beyond. We've been, and by we, I mean my brother, my mom, and my dad. And we are just so pumped. So Monday night, we're all excited. We got pizza, wings. We're all wearing our jerseys and our shirts, and we're all crowded in my dad's little man cave. And we're watching the game. And literally in 4 plays, we see Aaron like kind of sit. He like is sitting on um the floor or the field. And I'm just like, well, maybe he just got hit and he's kind of, needs a breath. He's fine. And then we're all like, he's not getting up. He's not getting up. And then and he can't walk. So he was helped off the field by the medical staff. And I'm like, you could probably hear a pin drop at at my parents' house, and probably in the stadium that had over 80,000 people. We're in shock, and we're thinking like, I'm like, don't worry, guys, it's probably just like a sprained ankle. He might be out for the game, long season. And then they show him in getting carted off, and he's got a brace on his leg. And it looks like the same brace that my friend wore for months when she tore her ACL. And we're like just besides ourselves. So, to use that example, stress is something that just comes out of nowhere, right?
Yep.
It's something unpredictable. And that was very unpredicted. So during that time, my dad and my brother, they don't practice meditation or yoga. But at that time, I was like, guys, we're just going to breathe. Just breathe in, breathe out. This is everything to them. They've been watching. Aaron Rodgers mania for 3 months. And they were even on a show called Hard Knocks on HBO that chronicled their whole journey. I mean, they are, this is their mecca. And they just watched, you know, supposedly the quarterback that's going to bring us to the Super Bowl, like carted off. And I was like, guys, heart problems run in our family. Let's just take a breath. It's not the end of the world. But that's what stress feels like, right? So we catastrophize. We get even more anxiety. So that anxiety might look like really negative thoughts like, there goes our chances. We're never going to win. There goes our chances of the Super Bowl. Like we're trying to predict the future and it's not positive, right? Like we're done.
Yeah.
We're done. And then we feel stressed physically. So we got all this awesome food and like we're all in knots. We couldn't eat. My dad could eat. He could probably eat through anything. But the rest of us, I'm like, I can't eat. I'm looking around. Everyone's upset, And then so when we get stressed and we don't see a way out, that triggers that helplessness and our mood drops. It plummets, right? And so then we get even further down in our mood and stressed out. So the thing is, our breath is with us at any time that we're alive. We can access that breath at any point. So just simple breathing in 4 and exhaling 4 when you're stressed would probably bring your stress level from a 10 to maybe even an 8. We're not saying it's going to disappear, but we're going to be able to cope with it. And when we're focusing on maybe counting or a word or a mantra, we're not thinking about how our world's going to become like a dumpster fire. So it doesn't trigger that hopelessness where we feel like, everything's at the end.
Yeah.
And I do have a positive ending to that story. So all those negative beliefs, I mean, for like the second quarter, we're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I didn't buy a jersey. But also of like, we're not going to win. We're not going to do anything. We're over. It's done. We ended up, I'm so proud of the New York Jets. They rallied together and the New York Jets do practice yoga and meditation. So shout out to them. They were able to pull it together as a team and in such an unexpected way. Like no one would think he'd get hurt, and especially in the first 5 minutes. Like if it's fourth quarter and he gets hurt, that's horrible. But at least maybe he would have gotten a couple touchdowns to kind of like help us out, right? But we tied the game against the Buffalo Bills, and then we won in overtime. So just because we experience stress, it's not the end of the world. That's an assumption that we're creating in our mind. But if we focus on the breath, maybe that will help us not cling to those thoughts and cling to the present moment where we are. And I like to give, this is an example when I work with my patients about stress. And I think this is also an analogy that might help as well. If you're not a Jets fan or a football fan and you can't relate. So when we get stress, now stress could be an email, a text from your ex-boyfriend, it could be an overdue bill, whatever you consider stress in your life. What that does to your body, it triggers our fight or flight response. So what that means is think of where you are right now. And say you're in a room, you can see the door behind me. I'm in my bedroom right now. You can see that door. It would be like a tiger coming through that door. And how freaked out would we be if a tiger came? I mean, they're a beautiful animal, but when they're caged, you know what I mean? Or when we're with somebody, or if they're like a little baby tiger, that would be very frightening to somebody. And that's what our body feels like when our fight or flight response is activated. So people are going to react 3 different ways. And I want to preference this by saying, find compassion for yourself because we're just genetically wired to react this way. It's the way our bodies are trying to protect ourselves. All we want to do in life is to survive. So, the first way that somebody might react is the fighter. And I'll self disclose that's how I am wired. So, if a tiger came in, I'd be like, let's go. Let's go, brother. I'm going to give it my best shot. But why that is not helpful is we hurt people with our words or, maybe physically. And one day we're going to meet somebody bigger and badder than ourselves. And so that practicing yoga and meditation says to the fighter, like, you know what? How about you just take a second? Let's not react. It's that 7 seconds that's so important, that delay. And then another category people can run into is actually the runner or the fleer. So this is somebody that they see that tiger, they're like, I'm out of here. I'm running. And that's somebody that avoids a lot of the stress. But what happens with that is it builds and builds and builds until you explode, right? So practicing meditation and yoga helps us say, you know what? I'm going to stay here. I'm going to stay in the present moment. And I am able to handle whatever comes my way. And then there's the freezer. So the freezer person, they see that tiger come through. You know what they're going to do? They're going to be like, maybe if I stay here, as pausing, like maybe that tiger won't see me. So what they do is they just kind of don't do anything. They kind of just, freeze up. And the good thing about yoga is the poses that we do opens up the spine. And the spine contains all our life energy. So when you practice that, you get that momentum to be like, okay, I am scared in this moment. I am stressed in this moment. But by practicing that meditation and that yoga, it helps you move through it. So really, but just by breathing, you don't have to get on a yoga mat. You don't have to practice any yoga. Just simply breathing says, I am safe. And when we feel safe and when we feel loved, we cage that tiger. And overall, why, yoga is so good is because it's exercise. And when that fight or flight reaction is triggered, think of how much adrenaline you need to run from a tiger or to fight a tiger. It's a lot. And so when we don't burn that off through exercise, what does it do? It like pings around in our body and it creates that stress. It creates disease. And that's why they say like 90% of doctors' visits are, stress related. And I would say that's probably why.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Um, Thank you for sharing that. I feel um, like the mental health portion of it and stress, like it's crazy how much everything goes together and how like yoga and meditation can help you kind of like bring that 10 down and calm. And it's kind of ironic because as you were explaining this, you probably saw that I was muting here and there. My child was screaming because he's over there. And I'm like, you're explaining stress. I'm like, I'm feeling stressed right now. But
He's
but but I just love that, there are ways to help and bring that calmness. So thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
Um, I know that we did talk about mental health, um, in I still have the question, I guess, here. That yoga and mental health are closely linked. Can you share how yoga can benefit individuals dealing with anxiety, depression, or other mental health changes? And I know you kind of already touched on some of those, but maybe if you have any like exercises that you do for those things.
Okay. Yeah, in really simple terms, anxiety is worry about the future, right?
Yeah.
And depression is more of regret of the past. So, beating ourselves up for, something I did in like 1993, or something like that, we're still upset with. But when we practice that meditation or yoga, which is the moving meditation, it brings us up to the present moment. And the present moment is where our life is actually happening. And there's a lot of different breathing exercises you can do. There's, a lot of different poses, you can do. Um, but what I really would encourage people to do is, the catch 22 is, if you're so anxious or you're so depressed, the last thing that you want to do is probably, get on a yoga mat. To be honest, we've all been there. It's like, we're good. We're good. When we go to different things that make us feel instantly good. So what I would really encourage people, if you're really struggling with anxiety and depression, I would first, contact a mental health provider, because as awesome as yoga and meditation is, it's not treatment. You know, it's a coping skill, but it's not treatment. And what I would all then your second thing would be to find some guided imagery. Like I said earlier, just lying on the bed. You don't have to know where to go, nowhere to be, just listening, just taking it in. And maybe that can give you the motivation, to do something that is helpful and towards yourself. That could be a different coping skill, that could be something else, but also maybe that encourages you to maybe get on YouTube and find a free yoga class, or maybe it encourages you, because that exercise, research shows that exercise, is one of the best things you can do for anxiety and depression. It's as effective as an antidepressant, if not even more. And also, like, a main focus of depression and also anxiety is trust. Like, I don't trust myself to make the right decision, or I can't handle the stress in the future. And then depression is more of like, I made a mistake in the past, so I'm going to make another one, right? And so when we sit in the present moment, we're trusting our own inherent worth, our own inherent goodness. And that helps alleviate that anxiety and that depression. It's like, you know what? I got this. And also, zooming out, what people don't realize either is what helps us improve our mood is healthy relationships. And going to a yoga class, that's another reason why I started our free yoga program, is so there's no barriers. You just show up as yourself. If you don't have a mat, we have one for you. It's because you can go there and you can talk to people, or you can just say hi, but be surrounded by like-minded people. And over time, you know what? I have to share, like, some of the best friends I've made have been through yoga practice, have been through yoga classes or my yoga teacher training. And when you have good support in your life, even an acquaintance, even somebody that you're like, hi, and you talk about the Jets game with, or, maybe you just go with a walk with them after, grab a coffee. Like, it's like, you know what? I have somebody who sees me and who is there, for me. And that is such a great way to help decrease, that anxiety and help uplift our spirit and our mood.
I know I keep saying this, but I really do appreciate you sharing all of this because um I just feel like there's been a lot of times with yoga and meditation, like I said, I always kind of turn away from it because I'm like, no, I don't have time to do, or I have like those excuses, like, oh, I don't have time to bring myself to the present, or I won't be able to slow my mind down. But the thing is like, when you were talking about how like it helps your how you feel. I remember when I used to actually, before I had my son, I would do lifting. And in there, every time before I went there, I'd be like, I hate the gym. I don't want to be here. I do not like it. But then at the end of the workout, all of those thoughts and feelings were gone. Like I felt good and my body felt good. And I would leave like, yeah, I feel like a warrior woman here. Um, so I think sometimes we let our mind kind of sabotage what could be good from doing that. So really what this is doing for me so far is just making me want to go to a class and just see what
That's
happens.
all. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and going to classes too, it's kind of like we use this analogy, it's kind of like dating. You might go to a class and that yoga teacher might have some really great qualities, but not be for you. So maybe you try another teacher as well.
Yeah. Which makes sense because like you said earlier, like Plattsburgh was not for you, but
Yeah.
then Canton was. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so that that's awesome. Um, so I know that you've kind of already touched base on this as well, but like um because you say that you're also the student, not just the teacher, but also the student, you know that there's always going to be that hesitancy when it comes to beginners wanting to go, because like maybe they've had experiences um, like you and didn't even go in through the door, or maybe, they're kind of hesitant, like, oh, yoga seems too, like, I guess how I was going by and being like, oh, it's too much. How would you you know, guide them to help that hesitancy and have them ease into yoga?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think a simple answer to that is you just got to go for it. And because there's never going to be the perfect time, the perfect situation, sometimes you just got to take that leap of faith, right? And you're probably thinking, oh, easy for you to say you're a yoga teacher, but you heard my story in the beginning. It took, and that's all right. If you go and try yoga, you had that intention of starting, right?
Hmm.
And so it might not be for you in this moment, and that's all right. Yoga and meditation is always going to be there for you. And even though, I've practiced for many years, every time I step on my yoga mat, I'm a beginner. We're all beginners. I don't like that, like beginner, moderate, advanced. No, because it's like, great, you can do a pretzel pose that they would consider advanced, but you can torture yourself in such a way that you hurt yourself and then you're still anxious and depressed because you're not focused on meditation. Like about, really wanting to be present with yourself to build that relationship, because really yoga is like couples therapy for you and yourself. Really, it's building that relationship with yourself. And the way that I teach yoga, so it's about finding a teacher that you really kind of connect with. So I call it layers of cake because I love cake. I could eat it every day, but I don't. So I use that in as I teach. And so think of it like on the Food Network where they have like a lot of layers of like the big cakes. You got, maybe 5 layers of a huge cake. So the first layer, if you look at that tall, layered cake, your bottom layer is the sturdiest, right? It's so that's where we start. And if you want to go up, I give different cues so you can be challenge yourself in flexibility and in balance. But each layer of that cake is buttercream frosting. It still is sweet. Your brain does not say, oh, hey, I'm on the fifth layer, I'm on the first layer. So it doesn't matter. And our bodies or our minds or whatever we're going through in that day, some days I'm layer five, some days, I'm a bottom layer. And that's okay. No one's going to take away your birthday. You're still a good person. I mean, I went to a hot yoga class in Lake Placid that I laid down for like 20 minutes while they taught the class. And I know a lot of people might feel insecure about that, but this is my mat, my time. This is my practice. I've had it. You know what I mean? So just laying and doing that. But you know what? As I see your beautiful son, I think of my nephew Teddy. He turned 3 in June, but when he was a little younger toddler, when I was visiting him, he lives in St. Louis, Missouri, living his best life. And his body just contorted to a lot of yoga poses. So like we are moving back to how our body naturally moves. It's so interesting. But with our sitting lifestyle, that sedentary lifestyle, think of it. I commute, I'm sitting in a car, I'm sitting in a car, and I'm sitting at my desk for 8 hours. And it kind of changes our body. So when we get on that mat, it feels so good. And we're getting back to how our body was created to be before we, lived in an industrial world. We were all hunters and gatherers. But the secret sauce to yoga is compassion, that compassion to yourself. And if you're looking for, a really good teacher, that's what you need to look for. Somebody that is going to take the time, somebody like Heather that took the time with me. I remember I was like, oh, I hate downward dog when I started doing that. She's like, well, it's because you're putting too much weight on your wrist and it hurts. Like being able to work with that and finding, compassion, for yourself, because in accepting who we are inherently. So flexibility really is genetic in some aspects. So I have probably the tightest ankles in Franklin County. I really do. There's some poses I really struggle with because I just can't, they just don't move. But yet I learned through my teacher training, my teachers like, out of all the yoga and the decades I've done, you have the most flexible hips I've ever seen. So who knew? I don't get a deduction on my taxes because of it. So it doesn't really matter. But like, it's so our bodies are all created differently, and that's beautiful. And so to be able to, as I've accepted that in yoga outside, I've accepted that a lot. And I've noticed that, when I'm going out with my friends and I'm dressed up, I'm not like, oh, your stomach could look a little bit different there. I wish this looked different. It's like, you know what? We're going out. We're going to have fun. We're beautiful.
Thank you for thank you for sharing that. I feel like I love that you said, you want a teacher that's with compassion and then the layers of the cake because we do tend to almost make really good healthy things a chore, I feel like, or some kind of like, how do I say this? Like, with beginner, there's just we put that pressure like, oh well, I have to get to the advanced. I have to be able to do that pretzel pose because what's his face, what's her face is doing it on the Instagram and I'm not there. It's like a very comparison type way and we take out the healthy pieces, the compassionate piece, the present piece. So I like that instead of looking at it like, first, second, third, or the bronze, the gold medal, you're looking at it in a manner of where do I feel today? Am I the second layer of the cake or am I the fifth layer of the cake? So I really,
Exactly.
yeah.
Thank you. And I forget to mention too, like you can do one pose a day. You don't have to do like a 60-minute class to get the benefits of yoga too. And I think that's where we were like I know for myself it's like a 0 to 60. It's like, oh, I'm not doing an hour a day. Must not be doing, enough.
Yeah.
Where I learned it is like just adding it into your day, right? So I would literally, I love coffee. So I'm on my second cup at work, the Keurig's not on, it's warming up. I literally would do like 3 poses on my left and 3 poses on my right, then make my coffee. And I felt so much better, going into my day. You just fit it in different ways. And knowing that self care is survival. That's how we tame that tiger. It's not selfish. When we are, balanced in ourselves, we only help others.
I love that. Um, and with that, I guess we're at the final question that I have for you. I know that you said you could do a pose a day. What are some, like, let's say someone can't go to a class, or maybe they can only do, they want to try one pose. Like, what are some poses that you would recommend for someone to try?
Yeah. Well, I will preference this by saying, like any new exercise program, consult with your doctor or healthcare provider, right? Um, but what feels good in my body might not feel good in your body, right?
Yeah.
So practicing different poses. And that's why classes are so great. Because I would go to yoga classes and be like, oh, I hate all those poses. But then I'd go to a different one and be like, I love that one. I love that one right there. And then I'd practice it at home. But it's also life's about balance, the good and the bad. So I would challenge myself to be like, hey, I know I'm not hurt in this pose, but I don't love it. But as I practice it, I practiced, a pose, I would, you know, it was almost like a practice of life of being able to work through something you didn't kind of like, you
Yeah.
know? And that's like that uneasiness that, you kind of breathe through. And I think, a lot of time in our society, where, like you said, it's that competition. We're just so focused on physical that we forget like all the emotional benefits. So as you release, so say you're doing poses that open up your hips. We store so many emotions in our hips. So I want to preface this by saying, like, you might feel a lot. Thoughts might come to you from the past. And also, I mean, there's been, a lot of times where I've been in the class full of people and like a tear would come to my eye and about something that has happened. It just whoop right there. So, and they don't tell you that in a DVD or at a class either. So I like to share that too. You're like, oh my gosh, is something really wrong with me? Like, why is this coming to me now? And why it's coming to you now is because you're in a safe place and you can release what doesn't serve you anymore. And that's one step closer to that inner peace, which is so, great. But to be more specific for your viewers, say I was stuck on a desert island and I only could do one pose. For me, I would probably say cat cow because it opens up that spine and it helps. So our spine has all our life energy in it, all the chakras. And so an example of that would be a garden hose. If it's twisted, the water doesn't come out, right? But as
Yeah.
we untwist that water flows. And that's within our body. So as we untwist our spine and we open it, that life force comes through us. Um, and also, I think Shavasana, that's our laying pose. And everyone's like, oh, that's just like my little nap at the end. And it very well could be, and enjoy that nap. But in our society, we need to be, like we said earlier, like that productive, that doing, that competition. I have seen as a yoga teacher, looking at all my students in Shavasana, it's the hardest pose. So all these people doing all these crazy poses and all these pretzel poses, the hardest one to do is Shavasana because you're sitting, not doing anything, and trying to let go. So if you could do one pose a day, lay in Shavasana for a minute, start there. And that's the hardest pose in yoga, really, I would say, to do, to just let it all go and to be with yourself in that moment. But a fun thing that we're starting in our community, so say you're like, you know what, Noelle, thanks for sharing all this, but I'm not going to get on my mat. I'm not doing any guided imagery. I'm not doing meditation. I'm good. I challenge you to do one thing. We're doing this in our community. So we call it red light yoga. So when you're at a red light, that if you could just breathe in 4 and breathe out 4 until the green light comes. And this is something that you can do by yourself or challenge your kids to do it, or your partner or your friend. And that's just a simple way you're actually doing yoga. So that's a great way to incorporate yoga in your life to help enrich your life.
That's awesome. I'm I'm definitely gonna share this challenge with everybody I talk to now. That's cool. I love that. I did want to add that when you're talking about Shavasana, I used to go to this yoga class in Malone actually, and I remember out of all the poses, that was the pose that I did not like. And so it's funny just kind of reliving those moments because at the time I did not understand like why. I just always kind of put it in a bucket of, oh, it's just because I don't like to just be with myself. I could never do the nap. Like everybody was like, "Oh, I just fell asleep. It's totally fine." And I'm like, "No," because I never feel safe. So in some cases, I wonder if I let go of that fear of the tiger coming in, for example, and just letting myself be in that moment, that I would probably have such a better experience than back then. Because I think I was in a place of my life at the time where I always expected that tiger to come. It's like
Mm.
if I am too chill or if I am too within myself or in the present, then that tiger is coming in that room, you know? So I really appreciate you coming today and sharing everything because it's really brought back so much for myself and for the viewers and listeners too, like I really am appreciative of that.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to interview me and to spread awareness for, all the benefits of yoga. And honestly, if people could do one thing, it's just hand over heart, right? And you can cage the tiger. If you don't have time for yoga or meditation, just telling yourself, like, I am safe, I am worthy, and I am loved.
I love that you say that because that's actually how we end the pre-pod. We say those exact words, so here we go. Um, I would say with that, you are loved, you are worthy, you are cherished, and I and we are proud of you. Until next time on the pre-pod. Bye.
Bye. Namaste.